So I do want to talk a little bit about parking before we get out of here. Just to let you know, parking zones. Currently, there are about 14 or so different parking zones within Jersey City, mostly in shopping district, business corridors, and learning institution. Of course, different zones bring about different rules. So we see, just going to give some brief examples. We see the learning institutions, right? We know and understand that we cannot park by almost nowhere where NJCU is, to the left, to the right, because that area is designated for residents only parking. And if you go to General Square or anywhere downtown, you'll notice you have to feed the meters, and you can only subsequently be in that area for a designated period of time, because the parking zones for that area are, they're very strict and they're very costly. They're very strict and they're very costly. So we need to just make sure that we're paying attention to that as it relates to what we should and should be doing when we are parking. Um, so some people, let me go here. Okay, some people have been asking me, right? Hey coach, do you think it's possible if we can get zone parking or residential parking permits in this area? And I just want to basically just list the different type of parking zones, one, which I briefly talked about, and two, the pros and cons to each of this stuff. Because just like there's benefits, there are setbacks. And again, all of this stuff, people, is on the city's parking website. Again, it's about doing our due diligence, going to see what are the ordinance as it relates to park. We all have problem with parking in Jersey City, right? Everyone always talking about parking, parking, parking. Now, we just heard Lindsay talk about the future of developments that's slated to go up in the community because of the master plan. That's pretty much going to dictate what type of development is going up, when it's going to go up, the proximity to each other development that's going up. So that's why it's very important for us to fill that out, because if we're constantly crying about parking, right, and we don't fill out the survey and complain about parking, then our complaints are falling on dead ears. All right. I always say I don't have a problem with people holding me accountable for as it relates to disseminating information, but you have to hold yourself accountable by doing what you need to do. I cannot overemphasize that enough. We must do what we need to do. So I'm specifically going to talk about residential parking here. I was just on a Van Verse Park meeting, and the parking director was on there, and they was basically saying, because people have asked me about this too, why don't we, because there's been complaints that people are parking too close to other cars and they're not giving them enough room to get out. So they want to do the lines. They want to do the parking lines. And I just caution people about the parking lines because, again, there are benefits and consequences behind all of these new implementations of rules. So while the lines may sort out who should be where, the lines also subsequently by default takes away parking spaces. Yep, I said it. The lines takes away parking spaces because the little wiggle room that you are allowed to get, when they mark the street, that's no longer going to occur. You're not going to be eligible to get that little wiggle room. But let's get into residential parking zones. Are they beneficial? So I just have some pros and some cons here. I'll tell you one thing, people. One of the pros that I really love, right, is that the potential to always have parking and no long walks. I vividly recall before I purchased my house, I used to live in or around Claremont, and parking right there was pretty much unconstitutional. I remember my wife would have to park all the way on Garfield and then walk up. Sometimes when she come home at night, I would have to go and meet her down there or go and park the car, then walk 2 blocks over. So that is a benefit that we can potentially always have available spaces. There's really no long walks because you wouldn't necessarily have to park outside of your residential area. It also brings about a sense of community. It, it feels good when everybody know whose car is who. So if someone tried to break in or doing something they ain't supposed to be doing or seen in that car, we know, hey, that's Miss Such and Such car, or that's Mr. So and so car, and we know that individual is not supposed to be in there. So it does bring about a sense of community. It also brings about better surveillance, right? Because if we parking right where we live at, we're going to have extra set of eyes on our vehicles. I know for me, I have 8 cameras on my house, so I'm able to see almost every car 20 feet either way. So it is an extra sense of security and better surveillance. I will say that. But again, there are some setbacks. People, I'm going to get to the process a little later, but this is not just as easy as, oh, we should have residential parking zones, so let's do it. It's not that easy. There's a process, right? And it's pretty much a rigorous process. Another thing, all cars must be registered. So what does that mean? That means there's going to be fees associated with those vehicles that's going to be registered and eligible to park there. Again, part of that process, you must be a resident of that area, i.e. you must provide proof that you are in fact a resident of that area. It also brings about hardships on family and friends because with this zone parking, only certain people can park there. And again, I'm an individual, right, that have multiple vehicles. I'm an individual that, and I know a lot of people have multiple vehicles. So it kind of deters you from having multiple vehicles because on top of paying insurance and registration and the maintenance and upkeeping on your car, boom, you got another fee to pay for each vehicle. And I would imagine at some point they would even begin to put some type of limitations on a family of people that's trying to get these zone parkings, man. Again, it's just so much, and I just urge you to meet this with caution. Again, I'm not trying to deter any particular area from advocating for parking. But I am saying that make sure we look into everything as it relates to where we want to park and things of that nature. I will say this, right? I think there is an opportunity for the Board of Education and the community to find a common ground. We know and understand that the schools are underfunded, correct? We also understand that there's a dire need for parking in the community. I love the fact that Mr. Walker made the executive decision, along with the powers that be, to allow individuals to park during COVID when schools were no longer being occupied, to let the residents park there, right? So that same type of concept, right? Only this time we will charge a nominal fee for those individuals who park inside the school, thus raising revenue for the schools and bringing about relief and comfort for residents in the community, right? And the rules can be as simple. All right, your car must be off school grounds before, I don't know, school open up at 8 o'clock, so before 7 or 7:30. Your car have to be moved or would be towed. I would imagine that the city, I mean, excuse me, the school district will be able to raise a great deal of revenue from that situation right there. I think that's a great opportunity and a great revenue stream for the school to bring in, as well as uh, pretty much giving the community some comfortable level of knowing that they're not going to get tickets, because you know and understand, right, that Jersey City Parking Authority is issuing tickets 24 hours per day. Literally 24 hours per day. In fact, people vehicles are being towed, as one of my friends' vehicle got towed because he parked by a hydrant because he couldn't find nowhere to park. So I just think that this is a match made in heaven, and it's something that we should continue to explore, right? So that's how we will begin to rectify that in my assessment, right? Now let's get to talk about some criteria, because again, you think that it's just easy as, oh, we need to be in a residential parking area and it should be zoned for residents only. All right, well, here are some of the hurdles we must climb in order to get to the first phase of this. A residential area shall be deemed eligible for consideration as a residential permit parking zone if, based on surveys and studies prepared by or at the direction of the municipal engineer or the director of the Division of Parking Enforcement. Objective criteria establish that the residential areas is impacted by commuter vehicles for an extended period of time. What that's saying is that when they conduct this traffic study in said area, it must be proven that the commuters are taking up a substantial amount of street legal parking. In determining whether a residential area is eligible for designation as a residential permit parking zone, the factors to be considered shall include but are not limited to the extent of the desire and the need of residents for residential parking permits and their willingness to bear the administrative costs. Again, this stuff is not free. It brings about a financial burden for some people. So again, I'm just cautioning you, not trying to sway you either way. 90% of the legal on-street spaces are occupied by motor vehicles during the period proposed for parking restrictions. So, like I said, I gave you the example of NJCU, right? You can't park in that area, I think, I want to say after 5 o'clock or before 5 o'clock. Yeah, you can't, you could park, it must be after 5 or 6 o'clock. But the point in what I'm saying is that 90% of the street legal parking spaces are occupied by motor vehicles during that period proposed for the restriction, right? Then subsequently, 20% of the vehicles parking in the area during the period proposed for the parking restriction are commuters rather than residential vehicles. So again, you have to climb these hurdles. You have to climb these hurdles. It's not just easy as I think we should have it, so we should do it. The extent to which motor vehicles registered to persons residing in a residential area cannot be accommodated by the number of available street parking spaces. So these are just some hurdles that we have to climb. Again, I think the onus is on the city. The onus is on the Board of Ed. The onus is on the community. This is a collective problem that's going to take a collective solution. I just offered one solution. I know there are a plethora of other solutions out there. And parking people, trust me, I'm fortunate now that parking is not an issue for me at all. And this has only been in the last, year, 18 months because of where I moved to. But before that, man, parking was like a science project. Parking was really like a science project. So I just want to make sure that we're continuing to work with all of the powers that be. So one, the community can get some relief to this parking. And again, go on the parking website. The Department of the Parking Authority. If you go on a website, Jersey City Parking, like you will see all of this information disseminated. You just have to look it up. You just have to look it up. And it's going to be a fight, people, because with the way that these new developments are going up and the required regulation, I think parking is like 0.25. So they don't have to do a parking per dwelling. And like me, I know I'm an individual that have multiple vehicles, right? So these developments are going up. You might have 100 units and only 25 parking spaces because that's all the ordinance requires. So there you have it. That's my take on parking. But again, do your due diligence, people. Do your due diligence to make sure that you're doing everything you can to make sure you're advocating for yourself and the community.